And so for today's talk, I would like to welcome Glenn Corbett, who is going to do the introductions, and I will turn it over to Glenn. Glenn?
Thanks, Charles, and thanks to all of you for coming to our Zoom webinar today. We're still getting people coming in, so you'll see more people populating the screen in front of you. This particular session today is one I've been looking forward to for a long time for a few reasons. One is because, the topic that we're going to be talking about today, of course, is of interest to many of us. But more importantly, the book that will be discussed today is something that's been desperately needed for a very, very long time. It's something that, for those of you historically, I should say, if those of you have a shelf of old books, the one that first comes to mind is John T. O'Hagan's book, Fire and Life Safety in High-Rise Buildings. That was published over 40 years ago. So there's been this desperate need to sort of think about how we fight fires in high-rise buildings and put it on paper, and that's the excitement we're going to hear about today. So there are two authors we have with us who will be speaking today. We also have who will be coming on the Zoom call from Florida, one of the three authors, Jim Murtaugh, who retired as a senior staff chief for the FDNY several years ago. It actually was an adjunct professor at John Jay College. I had him as a professor at John Jay back in the late 70s. So he's probably best known in my mind as the man behind the 100-man fire. Basically, if you have a working high-rise fire, you need 100 guys on the scene right away. And so he's sort of developed that concept so many years ago. And so it's a treasure to have him as part of this book. The other two authors we have are Jerry Tracy, who I've known for many years as a close friend, FDI speaker, fire engineering writer, fire engineering magazine writer, and also, of course, another retired battalion chief out of the FDNY, who really took on the mantle of particularly the early days of all the research into what we call flow path, the issue of ventilation, particularly in high-rise buildings as well, right? And so Jerry's been involved with this for decades now, and we're really happy to have him with us as a speaker today. And then sitting next to him on your Zoom screen, hopefully, is Jack Murphy. I've known Jack probably I guess about the long Jim Murtaugh, probably from the 70s. So Jack is local to me, living in New Jersey, was a former fire marshal and assistant chief in Leonia, in the Leonia Fire Department. But he's perhaps best known for his role of as the chairman of the Fire Safety Directors Association of Greater New York, which is sort of the leading voice for high-rise fire protection and fire safety directors, and the important work that they do in both residential high-rises, hotel high-rises, as well as office buildings. New York City is still one of the handful of places that actually has mandated fire safety directors, people who are in charge of fire safety in the building as a full-time position, supported by deputies. Because these are many cities basically we're talking about here, and Jack has done a lot of work in improving the high-rise fire safety for people who live and work in high-rises. Basically, he's done a heck of a lot of work in that area, and we're so glad to have him today as well. So Zoom has brought us all together here, and like I said, this is a new opportunity because you didn't have to come to New York to hear this, and we've got people from, as Charles mentioned, from all over the planet part of this session. So again, we welcome all of you. One other person I'd like to mention who will be on the call here soon as an attendee is Sally Regenhard. Sally is the mother of Christian Regenhard, the young probationary firefighter who was killed in 9/11. And the center is named after him, and his legacy lives on through the Christian Regenhard Center for Emergency Response Studies, RaCERS, and that's who's sponsoring today's event. So without further ado, Jerry, I'll let you take it over from here. Look at that skyline. Is that from New Jersey or the Brooklyn side? It's hard to tell.
Oh, that's from Central Park. That's okay. Looking at Billionaires Row.
There you go. Okay.
And Jack will be talking about that in this session. And Jack, unmute your microphone. If you like, I'll share the screen. Take it away, Jack.
There it is. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to begin by introducing this book that we offer to the fire service and beyond with the knowledge and experiences of three qualified veterans. If we put all our years together, Jerry and I came up with over 110 years experiences in high-rise building preparedness, fire, and emergency operations. The book content is divided into three parts. The first part is understanding the vertical challenges, and there are 7 chapters there on that element. Part 2 is command and firefighting unit responses. That was heavily done by Jim Murtaugh, myself, and Jerry Tracy, with a lot of the input from firefighting unit responses. The third part, the last part, is erecting a skyscraper and looking at new designs and techniques. What's here now? Jerry mentioned the Billionaires Row there, and all these different venues that are coming in the way of skyscrapers. Today, Jerry and I will give you a brief overview of the 12 chapters. These chapters also feature what we call code segments that we have a section of the book divided to building and fire codes, but we also implemented them in sections, particularly dealing with subject matter. So you can read it right there. When you're reading that subject matter, you'll have the code segment that's involved in that. We have lessons learned here from our experiences, and we asked some authors to write their opinions too in the lessons learned. So we have several of those. A lot of the appendices are in the chapters too. I'll give you one suggestion. We talk about firefighter smoke control operational guidelines, and we have a sample of that readily available in that chapter that we're dealing with. And there are questions for discussion too. So let me start by going to chapter 1, what we call the vertical challenges. And we're talking about high-rise growth. Tall building meccas are exploding throughout the world. Millions of people now live high above the ground in what we once thought was a futuristic biosphere in a science fiction novel. There are firefighter challenges for commanders and firefighters to become more familiar not only with these buildings as their construction, but the components that assault the buildings in fire and give off heat-related fuels of expected fuels.
Jack, if I may, and I'm sorry to interrupt, let me give a segue to that. If you were to crystal gaze your city in the future ahead of you, there may be things that you and your city has yet to experience, such as the Hudson Yards here in New York City. This is a city built within a city. This was built above an active rail yard in that during the construction phase, it was a delicate dance as they were building a platform above this rail yard that they were constructing and putting in the vertical supports for the platform in between the schedules of moving trains, very difficult and let's say challenging for the contractors. And Hudson Yards is really 16 buildings. It's 28 acres of, let's say, mixed land development that incorporates residential, office, mercantile, and places of assembly. And also they have planned for, and they worked with the local utility, Con Edison, that if they were to lose the grid, they have their own, let's say 13 megawatt electric power supply that is also cogeneration. And with that, here's what Jack was talking about, the vertical challenges. Go ahead, Jack. Jack, you're muted. Okay. Seems Jack is frozen up there. As he was mentioning, high-rise meccas exploding around the world. The challenges are enormous to many departments. Jack, you're unmuted. You want to pick it up?
Yes, yeah. And one of the things, Jerry, I read in the Times the other day, that Hudson Yards is just about to release their new super tall building, which will be 1,500 feet.
Yes.
So things are rapidly changing down there. So in the first chapter, I just mentioned about 3 things. One was the growth, the challenges, and the modernization, which Jerry alluded to also. And Jerry's going to talk about now firefighter preparedness.
Well, it's a tactical evolution in essence. Cities like Chicago and New York, where high-rise first started to appear at turn of the century. And that being said, it was slow for us the fire service in New York City, to learn, because fires are so infrequent, fire dynamics, fire behavior, and smoke travel in high-rise buildings. And this graphic here really shows the Equitable Life Assurance Building fire that happened 120 Broadway in 1912. And what was learned there was how fire and smoke extend up within these buildings in vertical voids, unprotected stair shafts, and things like that. And there was a firefighter killed. Lieutenant Walsh was killed line of duty at this particular fire. So there's many lessons learned there, as well as really previous to that fire, there was a lesson learned with standpipes. And that was a fire that occurred in a 16-story home life insurance building. And the fire didn't start in that building. It was an adjoining building, the Pete Rogers building, extended into the home life building, and the standpipes failed. So that was cause for standards to be enacted for standpipe systems that you'll find in NFPA 14 today. And it's fire codes, Jack.
Okay, historical experiences with urban development, talk about businesses and everything growing centrally in these local areas. The cost of land in the beginning was going up in New York and Chicago, and these rapid values of land forced buildings to go up more vertical. They found that the low-rise buildings were very unprofitable. In taming the fire environment, sprinklers or not, today there are still high-rise buildings, not only in the United States, but globally, that were constructed under old building and fire codes that still do not have sprinklers and remain an unsprinkled structure. In the code industry today, this is called the grandfather clause. If an existing building is to continue without change, it is maintained in accordance with the code when the building was constructed. I will say, however, recently the NFPA high-rise task force for safety, building safety, that Charles and I sit on, introduced into Life Safety 101 in the new edition, particularly the existing section, that high-rise buildings shall be sprinkled. So now it's in a standard, and now we have to bring that into codification. Balancing fire protection, all right, is a key thing here. When we go out to code developments, everybody says, well, we're going to sprinkle the building, but we want to trade off things in the way of passive fire protection systems, reduce the hourly rating on doors, petitions, and things like that. Jerry and I and Murtagh are of the value that there's no trade-offs here. You know, we don't know how this building's going to react, particularly through the life cycle of the building here. Both of these things are important. And Glenn worked over time with NIST about improving the sprayed-on insulation materials in these buildings. The history of modern code development, well, it began in the 1870s with the National Association of Fire Engineers, now called the I-Chiefs. It extended to the NFPA, where they first came out with things about sprinklers. And after that, it took 100 years before we got together with a national code. Prior to that, there were 3 legacy codes out there. And the national codes came about and put everything together across the country. I always pick on McDonald's for some reason. They start off in California with one code, go to the next state. By the time you get to New York, there are about 30 different codes that they have to look at. Understanding the development process of codes, these change every 3 years. It's a constant battle. We get things in and we're happy about it, but now we go back. The industry wants to take that out or trade off on something else. Participation in the fire service. The fire departments, local fire departments, cannot totally rely, and they're good, on these national organizations. They're looking for more voices. The voices come out of the ranking file in your department. Right? Local departments have a right to vote now. You could do it remotely. I'll give you an example. New York City has 12 votes. If you go across the river in my old town of Hoboken, they have 3. They're a much smaller community. But these are your voices there. If you want to protect the fire ground a lot more and the life safety of the occupants, you need to get involved. We talk about this a lot in the book. The whole idea is that the architects and engineers are there in the beginning to put the building up. We inherit the building for a life cycle of born, sick, and dying. That is our legacy of looking at these buildings, and we're out there constantly in the battlefield to help reduce line of duty deaths and injuries. One of the things after, again, major fires, we talk about them in the book. In the 1970s, we had a major fire in New York City. John O'Hagan wrote about that. And we developed a fire safety plan for office buildings. And that was consistent in the 1970s, which brought about the fire safety directives. Shortly after the terrorist attack on 9/11, the Fire Safety Directives Task Force, about 6 of us got together. One of them happened to be Jim Ellison, a few other retired, Larry Burns, a few other retired firefighters. We put together an emergency action plan. Once we did that, we went to the fire department, and in collaboration together, we rolled out an emergency action plan for all hazard threats, for natural and man-made disasters. So today they're in effect not only for high-rise office buildings, but for hotels, residential, sporting arenas. And getting back to the NFPA, the High-Rise Building Safety Committee, we rolled out free of charge on the website for fire and life safety emergency action plans as guidelines for communities out there to take a look at. I encourage you to do that. At this time, I'll turn it over to Jerry, who will start chapter 3, high-rise
Chapter 3.
construction.
Building construction. Of course, this chapter will talk about all the materials and methods of constructing high-rise buildings. And of course, we began with steel, talking about its strengths, its weaknesses, the standards that are required to protect it, so on and so forth. We go further into concrete, both post-tension, pre-tension, reinforced, the types of materials that they're adding to concrete to give it more strength. And of course, including prefabricated concrete, as you see in that graphic, including smart concrete. We talk about modular building construction, which is going to become much more popular and pervasive throughout the world, saving time, energy, and even quality. Floor designs, we speak of that, the floor plate of buildings, the core, the fact that much of our operations are from the core. We speak of remote stairwells as well. And certainly Jack is a proponent of that, having a third stairwell in a building and not just two. It seems to be an issue throughout Europe and other areas on the planet where many buildings only have one primary means of egress and access. We speak about exterior envelopes and facades, combustible cladding, metal cladding, aluminum cladding, and those dangers, including the insulation. And even the issue that happened with the cladding on the Grenfell Tower. And we also speak of solar glazing facades and how that's, can it be isolated, how to operate safely around that. And of course, today's unique tall building design features. And we just spoke about being built above transfer facilities. Now that's nothing new. Grand Central Station, built in 1871, there was buildings there that were built above what was active rail yards as well. Today it's the Hemsley building, but it was the New York Central Railroad building back in its day. And of course, cantilever designs, and we'll speak about that again. That's an issue. And also automated vehicle parking accommodations. There's a high-rise building in Miami, the Porsche building, which has that. So we go into that in detail as well. Now, chapter 4, fire protection systems. Jack, you're muted.
Yes, on fire, it's a balanced approach. It's vital. It provides increased life safety measures for the occupants, firefighters, and other emergency services. But again, here we're just going through certain sections of the book. Fire command centers, all right? And where are they? And I find them all over the country here. Some are in the lobby on a wall behind the lobby desk. Some are in rooms, and others are in the basement area in a room too, control room. In the I codes, we added a new thing for the fire command center, to be 10 by 25 feet. A fire command room also gives somewhat of an isolation to a degree for the commander to think alternative strategies and tactics. We can take cameras now, put them in the control room, and you can watch the elevators. Some of the things that are features in these fire command centers are elevator bank control panel, generator control panel, fail-safe doors in the stair tower to override them, a central monitoring station in case it didn't go out, you can override that, and key things. And today you can do this in electronic format, floor plan layouts, sprinkler and standpipe riser diagrams, plumbing riser diagrams, electrical riser diagrams, and HVAC system riser diagrams. These are very important for us in a response, particularly when there's no one there at 3 a.m. We can start using these things too. Take a look at the fire alarm control panel communication system that's in there. The fire department should know when they're building ahead of time, is there a one-way voice communication system that has an automatic scripted message prior to the arrival of the fire department? Or is it a two-way manual voice communications that's usually conveyed on the scene by the fire safety director over the speakers prior to the arrival of the fire department? And they also have the capability of calling wardens on the floor. And in some places, fire department have plug-in red phones. My challenges with the plug-in red phones, you got to use them. A lot of buildings I go into, I open up the cabinet, I'm blowing dust off it. When the fire units go in there, take it out, go upstairs, see how it works. If you're there for a call and it's a 1035, an activated alarm, nothing shown or anything, still take the phone with you. Again, upon arrival with these automatic voice communication systems, the fire department should have scripts themselves for manual operations. For example, attention, attention, the fire department has arrived in the building. We're investigating further and we'll keep you posted. Those are some of the things that we put in appendices in the back. Standpipe sprinkler systems. By now, we do see a combination of these things in the buildings. They're either automatic or dry systems. Firefighters going into the building should note where their sprinkler control valves are. If they go to stair A, they find one, walk around to stair B. There's none in stair B, that means there's one controlling the floor. And also take a look, if there's one in B, that means they come in the middle somewhere and you got to find out where they don't overcross. In newer buildings in New York City, everything is going to be crossed over. Again here, take a look at sprinklers. We give you some ideas when the sprinkler lines are activated, and we pose some questions in this chapter. Should you shut down the sprinklers or keep them flowing? How long to return to the system to normal? And what are the problems of firefighting in sprinkled areas that we should know? Other types of extinguishing systems. We're all familiar with commercial hood systems. And in high-rise buildings, when you have a cafeteria or you have restaurants in that, we all know they have an exhaust system. The thing is that the big thing the firefighters should look at as a best practice is have a copy of the duct run mounted by the manual pull station in the kitchen, and also have one readily available at the fire command center. The higher up they go, they take left turns, right turns, and everything else. I think Jerry had a fire in a high rise where the ductwork came out into the subway. Also note that there are nowhere fire action systems and other extinguishing systems are and what they protect. A big thing here is out of service systems. Basically, we're going to buildings. We don't know if the sprinklers are out that day. We don't know if they're doing alteration projects in the building. However, with smart technology, there's a capability getting this in electronic format as firefighters roll out the door. And I'll discuss that later in chapter 7. Passive fire protection systems. We talked about the balance approach, active and passive. Firefighters should have a comprehensive understanding of these systems and the key role they play in life safety control, spread, and smoke conditions. Newer things that are finding their way into high-rise buildings are areas of refuge, AKA areas of refuge assistance for people with disabilities. It's a space to accommodate wheelchairs and other limited people with mobility, and have a direct access to a stair platform or an elevator bank or a separate remainder behind the smoke barrier. And they should be provided with a two-way voice system. And firefighters should note where these areas of refuge are in the building. As Jerry and I did the book, we're noticing that in certain parts of Asia, to have an area of refuge floors up in the mega and super tall building so that the occupants can't go all the way down. They have an open air space up there. And right now, I would like to go into chapter 5 and talk about building systems. My key here is that, and I said this to Jerry, many building systems operate similar to our human body functions. As firefighters, we strive to maintain our health and wellness to be ready for battle. Therefore, we should take every effort to gather tall building knowledge by adopting a know before you go mentality. And if you follow me on fire engineering, that's K by G. We can do this by collecting intelligence and create battle plans. And here's how we look at this. We compare.
Well, let me ask you a question, Jack. Why don't you tell us a little bit about building systems, building management systems? Could you allude?
Yeah, I'm coming to that next, Jerry.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. Two domains here. Firefighters should better understand the structural members is the human skeleton, HVAC systems, respiratory, utility systems are circulatory, electrical systems, the nervous systems we have, and alternative power sources. How about body implants that we have? All right, pacemakers. Knowing and understanding these things, it would be good to maintain the building systems in good health. Like Jerry said, building management systems and building automation systems is an exclusive systems that have been in tall buildings for years. Firefighters should know about them. They should know where they are and what they control in the environment. They may control HVAC systems, lighting, access controls, elevators, closed circuit TVs, generators, so forth and so on. So they're usually in the building in the engineer's office. And however, if you have a building information card, you'll know that there's a remote access and there's an 800 number or a 201 number or 609 number for the engineer who's off site, particularly 3 in the morning. HVAC systems and smoke control management, because of the height and sophistication of these complicated smoke spread, the design of high-rise buildings is critical for their potential spread. HVAC, smoke management go hand in hand with the fire command fire smoke control system, and the presence of smoke barriers are essential to limiting smoke mitigation in tall buildings. So right now, I'd like to turn the rest over to Jerry. He'll be talking about utilities, electrical, gas, and water, so forth.
And of course, the most common responses to these buildings are going to be an emergency involving a utility, electric, gas, or water. So we go into certainly understanding these systems, working with building engineers, knowing how to safely isolate problems, certainly not to put water on electric. But we not only talk about electric, gas, and water, we go into steam as well, because there are many cities, more specifically New York City, that uses steam as a utility. And other building systems, Jack, maybe you could.
Building systems are so big, we had 2 chapters. Other building systems here are the transportation modes in the building. We all think of stairs. They move people, materials, and objects throughout the building. Arteries for access, egress, passage, and moving from one location to another. A stairwell in an older building and still in an existing system has gone through numerous permutations, but still has one function: move people up and down and things up and down. Stairs are a variety of things. And if you read many books that on stairs, they'll either say AKA stairwell, stairway, staircase, stair riser, stair shaft. So Jerry and I and Jim just said, we're going to call them stairs. Whatever your local area calls it, you call it. Some stairs are enclosed or open. We still find open stairwells in many older buildings, particularly at the turn of the 19th century, that are open, directly go into the lobby. All right, they're not enclosed at all. Scissor stairs, it's a pair of stairs, 2 sets of stairs, which crisscross one another, either within the same shaft or in a adjoining enclosure. My favorite are, and I still like them, and a lot of us do, are smoke towers or fire towers. All right, they are a godsend in a fire condition, particularly for evacuation of people in the building. They go from the building on the floor into a what I call open vestibule with a shaft that's protected, and they open up the door to the staircase and go down. By far the best ever of this. And for the life of me, I don't know why they took it out of the code. All right. Access stairs installed between tenant spaces. Jerry owns 2 floors in a high rise, 27 and 28. He doesn't want the people to go outside. They'll have an access stair. This also tells you about smoke spread too. And the other thing too is what I call in duplexes or triplexes, there are access stairs that go either up to the floor above or below. So you have to know your apartment buildings too. And we're still dealing with exterior open cage stairs and fire escapes. I've seen a lot in the United States going across. We put in one thing we put in the code was that every 5 years, all fire escapes shall be have a structural engineering report on it, not scraped and paint, a full structural engineer report. All right, so that's the whole idea, folks, about being involved in the codes. I'll turn this over to Jerry, who'll talk about communications.
Communication is vital to one, manage, coordinate our operations, understanding where fire is extending and how. And I neglected to mention in building systems, other arteries where fire can develop and extend, such as refuge chutes, compactor shafts that are most common to residential buildings, but also you'll find them in hotels, institutional occupancies, hospitals, as well as linen chutes. And again, communications. FDNY for a long time had looked at many different methods of improving our communications. As a matter of fact, Chief Vinnie Dunn, so many people are aware of him, had conducted some communications tests in the Empire State Building, and that was from below grade areas to upper floor areas. And the methods that FDNY employed was the use of radio repeater systems in a battalion car, post radios, which are radios that boost the signal from 2 watts to 45 watts, where there'll be a post radio in the lobby and one will be brought up to the operations floor or the fire sector, if you will. But today, we're fortunate that a firefighter had actually developed what is the ARCS, Auxiliary Radio Communication System, which also boosts our signals. It transmits it through a coaxial cable throughout the building. It has a minimum of 2 channels, which could be tactical and command, up to 4 channels, which can be used for other domains, if you will, evacuation, search and rescue, or some sort of a medical emergency or rescue or collapse situation that they should be operating on a separate frequency altogether. And of course, in this chapter is new buildings, new designs, and techniques. And Jack, maybe you could tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, Jerry. Jerry, the other thing too is that I talked before about code segments. The section that Jerry talked about, here's the ideal spot where we put that code segment. It says in the codes today that emergency first responder communication shall work in all buildings. I repeat, all buildings. So this is where the fire suppression units have to have an understanding of that, besides the code geeks. All right. We talk about OEO and FEO elevators. Today we newly constructed buildings over 420 feet or greater have an occupant evacuation elevator to be used prior to the fire department arrival. You may, as you get there as an incident commander, continue to use that mode, or you can now have it as a manual mode too, switch over to those operations. The other good thing that came out was fire emergency operation elevators. Again, these cars, both OEO and FEO, will be provided with greater protection for shielding from hoistway water, smoke, and heat, and within the protected elevator lobby. This is a fully protected lobby that can't be traded off on anything. There are 2 doors coming off the stairwell. One leads you directly into the lobby. The other one will lead you behind the fire barrier walls into the corridor space. So the firefighters come up, will take what I'm pointing to my right here, take that one, go right into the corridor without now contaminating the smoke in the elevator lobby. So that was a very thought out process, dealing with some fire guys, like I'll mention his name, John O'Donoghue, the late John O'Donoghue, Ken O'Donnell, Quentin Maver, and a gentleman from Washington, said 7 years on this code thing to pound this out. So my hat's off to them. Energy storage systems are installed in several locations. There are several different types of alternative power sources. Basically, we're dealing with lithium-ion batteries that, think of your Tesla car of that nature, now putting them in the building, and they're there to augment the electrical power grid. So when we hit these high peaks, these batteries kick in, take over a certain percentage of the high rise. They're in the code process now, being modified again. We're still not totally happy with it. There's no really good ignition, a suppression system for it. That's always been an ongoing battle. When you put in these rack systems, one battery could ignite, and it could, what we call a thermal runaway, and now consume all of the batteries. Now, once there's water applied, they're applying sprinklers now. Where's all the contaminated water go? And the other thing too is reignition. These we bring this thing under control. I think in the Hawaii, it reignited a day later. Thank God it was in an outside container. So the IC should have post-fire overhaul considerations for this event. This building, this section of the building is going to be out a while. In new construction, I can put them in limited spots. But when I'm dealing with older buildings with small MER rooms in different locations, they're going to be all over the place. So they have to take that in consideration. It's still what I call a work in progress, folks. Another one is a Firefighter air system. It's what we call the Standpipe Air system for air. All right. It's been around for a while. I've noticed this in California in 2000. It can provide air throughout the building. In California, they have an air truck. They bring it to the building like feeding the FDIC. Now supply the air into the building. The thing here that I like about it, particularly for the small departments, you don't have to have a bottle brigade. It takes one firefighter to bring bottles up for one floor. And multiply that by 60 floors. All right. Now, for small departments, even it's going to hit large departments too. Jim Murtaugh's thing will now go up to 160 people. All right. You have to think of those things ahead of time. These are things that are out there. I see a lot of activity going on in Texas, putting these systems in. So with that, I'll go to chapter 7, which will be the last section of part 1. And chapter 7 is If These Walls Could Talk. And I take this literally, folks. I really do. You know, on the outside of the building, you read it one way. You go inside the building, it looks totally different than the outside. Each building is unique in of itself. All right. There are no sample cookie cutters here. Every building has designs in it that are built differently. Once you get in there, they'll reconstruct things too. I just worked with a hospital. It just opened 2 years ago. They're in there renovating already. Because they have new doctors that come in, they want to move this around, change that, do this, new machinery coming in, so forth. All right. But you need to know this stuff. The fire departments have to adopt what I call a K by G, know before you go mentality, to be more effective in managing these emergencies. And what Jim Murtaugh says, when you manage emergencies with intelligence, it's more decision-based knowledge. You take away guess-based knowledge on things. And we do that a lot in some of these buildings. We gotta have to do away with that. Knowledge is power. So with that, I'll turn this over to Jerry. He'll talk about building intelligence and the power of creating battle plans from this stuff.
Well, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about the building cards. If it wasn't for you, Jack, we wouldn't have them.
Yeah, the building information cards were developed out of the EAP plan that we talked about. I have a running thing with the fire department. It used to be I called it BITS, and they told me I couldn't use that terminology. It was called Building Intelligence Tactical System. The fire department told me BITS here stands for Bureau of Investigation and Trial. So we changed it to Building Information Card. So a little behind the scenes trivia. All right. So they're developed there. They're a quick snapshot. I'll talk about this a little later on in this section, but I'll tell you what we get into QAPs. All right. So go ahead, Jerry. Just talk about the building intelligence battle plans.
Battle plans. And if it wasn't for Jim Murtaugh, we wouldn't even understand this concept or even bring it about in the book. And it's building intelligence. And for the most part, pre-fire plans and alike are static information. Battle plans, as we're introducing into the book, are going to be plans of action. I'm going to back up for a moment to talk about, Jack had mentioned energy storage systems. I'd just also like to mention in that subchapter that we will discuss how to approach events that are involving, let's say, thermal runaway in these battery arrays, using gas meters, the measurements and the gases that you can expect to be generated from these events. And probably the one most important gas to check for would be oxygen, the oxygen levels. That's going to be key for your approach to safely operating these things. But to get back to building intelligence, pre-incident, and battle plans, battle plans are a significant introduction into the fire service in that we will discuss not only and give you floor plans of the building from a street view, where all your hydrants are, FDC connections, the fire department connections to the standpipes. We'll give you a floor plan of the base floor of the building and other floors, machinery spaces that could be in sublevels. We break up the floor plan into quadrants from the front entrance, the A side, the one side of the building, one exposure. We break it up into quadrants going clockwise, A, B, C, and D, and knowing where your fire is and or your alarm. Basically, we'll know, and it'll dictate what should be your attack stair, what should be the evacuation stairs. So you will certainly find this illuminating, to say the least. And also the battle plans we will discuss, talking about the expected fuel loads on the different floors. And the significance of that is to ensure that if you have a significant fire, we'll talk about the levels of fire and smoke, that you're using the proper equipment and the proper flows of water to really accomplish what you have to do. Smart firefighting, Jack, maybe you can elaborate on this.
Yeah, it's smart firefighting, and the acronym SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Smart firefighting has been active through the NFPA process as one tool of that. It's basically an intellectual platform of the Internet of Things, the software programs. These programs can range from fire units conducting a recon survey to gathering pre-incident intelligence, fire code inspections, and other data domains essential to fire department response. What we see here is that you put in what they call those QR readers that you have to go to get the menus now. We're looking at putting them in the building now and getting this information. We can get information that the fire inspector was there, they found this violation. The building department was there, they found that violation. So we have that input with these smart platforms, which I think are excellent. Years ago in Jim Murtaugh's class, we talked about this. Jim talked about the UPS. You can find your package anywhere in the world, but I can't find things in the building. So it's just one of those little things. We just had a plug-in thing on the outside, and we had a great discussion about that. Again, these platforms are changing the firefighter service. Firefighters, we have to be a little bit more adaptable to these things. We're a little slow on the uptake here. When I teach at John Jay, I say, how many people have a flip phone? Not too many people put their hands up. They're probably on version 10 of the iPhone or something. So we keep up with that technology, but we're not keeping up with technology to benefit us on the fire ground. Totally, it's here. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to apply it. So leveraging these things, we call it big data. Oh, everybody's afraid of big data. So what we do here, and what I've done, is break them down into 3 manageable levels. All right, what I call quick action plans. Level 1 is, as you're going out the door, you're going to get particular initial things for initial operation. Oh, the type of building, the size of the building, the occupancy, fire protection systems, what type of FDC connections. And the big thing, you went in the building, you did the recon. What are safety and precautions in my response? ESS on the 7th floor, the 15,000 gallon diesel tank in the basement. So these are things that you have input in. You own this. I'm telling the fire service, you own this. You have to be involved. QAP2s are what I call how to quickly deploy troops. Jerry pointed out the base of the building. If you come in the front of the building, you put an arrow there. That's the box you showed up at. And what's to the left of the arrow? Stair goes to the roof, one has a standpipe. Stair to the right goes to the basement, no standpipe. Elevators, low, mid, high rise sections. You even walk into the building, you have intelligence. You stay right there, you do a 360 around the building, you do your size up because you get that information at the same time. Both 1 and 2 are 30 to 60 second reads. That's not a hard challenge. QAP3 is what I call a comprehensive overview of the building. And that's what I call that the back of the card. Some people call that the front. It's 10 boxes of information going from ventilation, fire protection, hazardous materials, so forth, and so on. So those are things that are in that section.
That's all part 1.
Oh, yeah, Bobby?
That's all in part 1.
No, part 1. Yeah, part 1, 2, and 3, Jeff.
Part 1 has 7 chapters. Now part 2.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't finish tabletops, Jerry.
Let's go to tabletops.
Okay, Jeff. All right, tabletops. All right. We encourage fire departments to periodically do tabletop exercises with management staff. Do a face-to-face in the building. Get to one of the things in my classes when the students come in, I challenge them. But what's your first do fire company, and get what's the number of the precinct in your area? All right. So there are people here that you should at least have a face-to-face conversation with. The other thing here is also, besides tabletops, do a full-scale exercise, an annual one. I've been involved in several in the city with all agencies, OEM, fire, EMS, everybody coming in, having actors play sceneries. We've done one for fire where we started the fire in the lobby and said you can't use the fire alarm voice communication system. The best part about that, management was there. They saw they couldn't talk to everybody else in the building. It clicked something for them. All right. Now they have a redundancy communication system approved by the fire department with a variance in the security room. So now if something happens to the panel, let's think of active shooter coming in, shooting up and killing your communication system. Now you have a backup place to go to. So these are some of the things relative that we bring out in the book. So again, tabletop exercises can bring out these things, particularly when you do a hot wash. Jerry, go ahead.
Jack, would you recommend full-scale exercises with utility companies as well?
Yes. Yeah, they play an important role, and sometimes transportation.
Absolutely.
We're dealing with subways, things of that nature. So you just got to look at the dynamics of what you're trying to do. And when you get all these thinking heads in the room, you'll come up with a plan for an exercise.
Even transportation companies, if you have a large event in a residential building during inclement weather, they could deploy buses so that these people at least have one place to go. Yep. Things like that. So that's all part 1, chapters 1 through 7. And of course, part 2 leads off with command, as Jack had mentioned. And there it's a holistic perspective of command. And of course, it's understanding the concepts of command, control, management, direction, leadership, and of course, command presence. And we take that further into the command process and systems. Of course, everyone is familiar with the incident command system, which basically is your structure. That is the what and the who. Jim Murtaugh has introduced incident process system, really, which is fluid. It's the how and when. And if you'll notice in this graphic, we've added a domain. The general staff has operations, planning, logistics, and finance. We've added medical, which is vital to events in high-rise buildings for civilians and firefighters alike. We even have a rapid medical team, basically alongside a rapid intervention team, what we New York City calls FAST, Firefighter Assist and Rescue. But that's very important to have them there and ready. And of course, the command staff, we've included building intelligence representative, and I think Jack could explain a little bit more about that. Jack, you're on mute.
The building intelligence representative, basically, if you have a fire safety director, he can liaison with the incident commander And in a lot of buildings, you have engineers, building engineers. Who's the key engineer for that building? Keep them there. Don't let them walk away. Basically, the fire safety directors know they stay in place. Engineers say they have to go somewhere else. If they have to do something, assign a firefighter or two to them, make sure they come back. All right. So that's some of the things we've learned over the years. The other thing, too, we looked at that is key, and this is something that the IMS structure should look at, is creating what we call an incident intelligent officer. All right, who could work in the lobby there, basically work with the lobby control officer and the IC here. Now, this individual is gathering all this intelligence that he's gleaming from the building information card, listening into the voices of the engineers and the fire safety director. And now that individual intelligence officer, we have this in the military. All right, I don't know why we don't have it here and never thought of it before, but we're pushing this forward. That the IMS structure should take a look at it, creating an intelligence officer's position in their scheme of the structure here. The whole idea is that it takes some burden off the commander. All right, that's another thinking process. We always say the span of 5. All right, so this is another tool that the commander should use, and I hope it gets well received. Jerry?
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the fire safety director?
Oh, the fire directors. Yeah, that gentleman. I don't know who they are. All right. The fire safety directors here play a key role here. They always have in these buildings. We've learned over the years in New York Cities, the LAs, and in Chicago's that have dedicated people, and in Boston too at times. The idea here is that they take an action prior to the fire department arrival. I can say the fire chief gets in there. I say, Chief, at this time we have a smoke condition on the 17th floor. We're using stair A as evacuation. Stair C is now available for the attack stair. Little things like that help move the process along. There's no what I call wait and see and let me catch up. The thing here that we are asking through the NFPA right now, and I'm working on this committee, is that we're developing a standard for building fire safety directors, professional qualifications for the position. This in high-rise buildings, I'm talking now high-rise building, should be a dedicated position, not wearing Dr. Seuss hats. You're the engineer, you're security guard, and everything else. Too many things to maintain here. All right, you're taking charge of maintaining the fire protection systems. You're overseeing building support systems that have a relationship to the fire alarm panel, HVA systems, the BMS system that could help out too. You maintain the entire means of egress for the complex, and your key role is liaison within the IMS structure. So this is a job in itself here. You need qualified people to do this. Years ago, here's a story. My son's school didn't finish the sprinklers in the college. This is after the Seton Hall fire. And I'm sitting in the room with the president of the college. And the college said, well, we don't have anybody to do that. I said, well, there's another college up the road. Get together and get a fire protection here. Well, we have a safety officer here. I said, excuse me, sir, what's your role? I'm retired FBI. I said, sister, next year, tell the history teacher he's teaching chemistry. All right. These roles can't be interchanged that quickly. You have a certain perspective of things. So put that person in that position. There's one city, I'll mention it, Jersey City, allows on-duty firefighters to go to the course as a fire safety director and man the building. I applaud them for that. Jerry?
Well, we also go on to the challenge of super and mega tall buildings. And here, we're certainly suggesting that once your event occurs on floors above 25, it's a totally sky-based operation. You can no longer access it with the aerial apparatus, platform apparatus that some departments in Europe and Asia have some that go up many, many meters. But what we're certainly suggesting here is you'll need multi-staging areas, and you may very well be adding command positions to that. So it'll be good for you to read that section as well. And decision-making. Now, this is a very important area, and certainly Jim Murtaugh was heavily involved in guiding us through this and writing it up. And it talks about making decisions. We started off with dysfunctional command, and that being something that's probably common to most, understanding when it's dysfunctional and how to bring that into a functional, operation. To say we speak about functional command, cognitive command, and of course we speak about recognition, prime decision making. But you have to understand that is only as good as your database in your brain, that tray of 35 millimeter slides that turn until you recognize something. We speak about making decisions, those that are fast, intuitive, unconscious, automatic, which is done in brain one, and those that require some conscious, reliable, deliberate thought, which is conducted in brain two. And to seek counsel from your other domains, your other chiefs on scene. And this is all to condition the mind, not only of the incident commander, of all the other domain supervisors as well, that you're operating almost as if it was a 3D board game. You have firefighters on different levels. When the incident commander is receiving information, such as the level of fire, smoke, tenability, that they deploy units to those areas again, as if it was a 3D board, and how to do that seamlessly, and what to look for, communications you expect, feedback, what to ask for, and certainly those red flags where if there's radio silence, that could very well be a problem. And moving on to chapter 9 is firefighter unit response. And there we really go into detail of what information you expect, what you're looking for beyond just the alarm information, what building intelligence you may have on the building for initial operations, for the type of alarm. If they're saying, it's a hazmat, it's a gas leak, it's a fire, it's a collapse or something like that. We go into entering the lobby, and where would you find the fire alarm control panel? And Jack had talked about that. We'll be confirming building status, the shutdown of the HVAC system. Would be also confirming for those occupancies that are applicable, that announcements have been made to the occupants in the building. And this is also the implementation of fire safety all hazard plans, following our battle plans that was discussed, ensuring that elevators are available to access the area or locations. And of course, communications, those initial reports and communications so vital so that everyone on that frequency is being informed of what we've got, what to expect, basically painting that picture for everyone. And of course, when they arrive to that area, it's what is the level of smoke, fire, and tenability. Now, this is very important because it's important to the battle plan. And we define levels of smoke, fire, and tenability as level 1, 2, and 3. To be specific, level 1 would be a fire. And I'm not just talking about smoke, that's going to be a little bit different, but fire. A fire that can be handled by an extinguisher or one line. Now, we're not discussing the backup line. A level 2 fire would be one that requires the minimum flow of 2 hand lines. And of course, the battle plan would discuss, would they advance in tandem or would they come out of different launch points, things like that. And a level 3 fire, which is a fire that requires master streams. Now, these reports also give the incident commander the awareness of where units have to be deployed based upon the smoke conditions, because understanding the ventilation profile of a building, and the ventilation profile is the internal airflows that you can expect in these high-rise buildings. It will certainly go to the uppermost floor of the bank of elevators that serves the fire floor, and most certainly the top floor. And of course, the attack, launching the attack. In this section, of course, we talk about standpipe operations, supplying them, augmenting the systems, water problems. There's not too many books that talks about water problems and how to solve them. You'll find that certainly in this book. And certainly the standpipe operations, we talk about the equipment that's appropriate for that particular system. You have to know your systems, hose placement in advance. And of course, we talk about retreat, when it's appropriate to retreat, regroup, and reinforce and reattack. And we speak about fire units and supportive operations, most certainly ladder companies, truck companies, other types of units, evacuation, search and rescue groups, and ventilation support group, which of course is so very, very important in high-rise buildings today. The ventilation support group in New York City that responds to high-rise fires, both in commercial and residential buildings, as soon as they arrive, they set up equipment to pressurize stairwells if the building does not have a fixed system. And this is very important to keep those stairwells clear. As a matter of fact, it was just mentioned in the Grenfell inquiry just a few days ago by a gentleman, a PhD, Dr. Paul Grimwood, on how to maintain the safety of stairwells that is so vital for the protection and safety of the people that occupy these buildings. So we talk about that. We speak about the battleground, the landscapes that you can expect, core design. And of course, it goes on to, other information. So it's all inclusive of certainly the attack and methods of attack. We go into detail as well, as I had mentioned, ventilation support groups, pressurizing stairwells. And we talk about the research that was conducted. And here I have to throw a shout out to what was our commissioner at the time we conducted this research, Commissioner Cassano. If it wasn't for his support and his understanding for the need for this research, we wouldn't be, the fire service wouldn't be as educated as they are today, well beyond FDNY. And this research, we certainly defined the placements of fans, what size fans were, let's say, powerful enough to give us the pressures we needed. And to augment it, you could place an additional fan 3 floors below the fire sector to give you the pressures. But we also, and Jack had mentioned, there's appendices. There's an appendices here that will give you, even in illustrations and visuals, on where to set up fans on beyond just pressurizing stairwells, but how to control and move smoke, even in the exhaust mode, in the most efficient manners and way. So that's key and vital. And of course, the research took us on to fire dynamics and the types of fire behavior that you can expect in buildings specific to wind-driven fires, and information in the book and the training that was given to all the members of the FDNY was all the visual cues that would, from the street, you could tell whether or not you had a wind-driven fire, or even as you arrive to the fire floor, the pressures of smoke just coming into the attack stairwell from a public hallway and things like that, so that you can determine alternate tactics may be appropriate right from the beginning. And that being said, alternate tactics, we also established what tools would help us with alternate tactics and an alternate approach with fire curtains and blankets to block the wind and basically shut that down. And also the use of a high-rise nozzle that you could deploy water into a space from another location, and most often that would be from the floor below. And of course, Chapter 10, the vertical challenge for office buildings, which are an arena unto themselves. And Jack and I just spoke about this yesterday, office buildings. You know, there are some that have large open office areas, and what isn't discussed really too much in the fire service is traveling fires that can travel across the floor. It was at the 69 Washington Street fire, the Cook County Administration Building fire in Chicago, that the fire traveled and it took maybe 25% of the floor in less than 15 minutes. So we have to understand that. We have to, we'll talk about the approach, how to safely approach that, how to reduce the possibility of, let's say, flashover or smoke explosions going into these areas. Of course, we go on to residential high-rise now and hotels. These are more compartmentalized, of course, but still the danger of injury, both to firefighters and civilians. And the fact that here, it's not the methods to communicate to these people, to tell them either to shelter in place. Many people leave their apartments, even if it's not the fire department, just because of the presence of fire trucks outside the building. So we discuss all of those things. And we have a subchapter on institutional occupancies. And I don't think there's anybody on the planet that knows hospitals better than Jack Murphy.
These institutional occupancies, particularly in urban settings, all right? As a fire safety director, let me just explain to this hospital I dealt with. It's in Midtown Manhattan, the Upper East Side. It's 3 blocks long. It's 20 interconnecting buildings. There's two grades below, 2 levels below, subcellar, that connect into 2 other hospitals, independent hospitals. It connects into the college dorms. It connects into a hotel, mixed occupancy use, and a residential building. So get a fire condition down below grade there, you have a lot of smoke management issues. The thing here about hospitals is when you respond there on a complex like this, where you're going. When I first got there was 1 box on 70th Street. When I worked with John O'Hagan to put in the new fire alarm system, we created 5 municipal boxes. At least you had a little cluster of buildings. But in a recent class that Jerry and I did in Indianapolis, I challenged the local IFD company, who's the safety officer for the hospital across the street. It's a major hospital. They didn't know, but I'm pretty sure we went back to the firehouse and sat down and had a long talk with them on high rises. And in the hospitals here, need to know major things for evacuations. All right, we're so used to up and down evacuations. Here, I'm doing horizontals. I'm moving from one fire compartment to the other. And when we put the hospital together over the FDR Drive, it sits over a 6-lane highway. It's 1.2 million square feet, and it's 2 blocks long. Rather than do a vertical HVA system, we broke it up into 5 compartments on the floor. So need to know all these things about hospital areas. People keep telling me in the classes saying, oh, the most dangerous area is the lab area, would have radiation, things like that. I say, no, the most dangerous area in a hospital is a loading dock. At any given time, you have no idea, good products coming in, bad products going out. And that's a horrific fire if you have ever had one there. When you have these evacuations, you need to chart it out, horizontal movement. And when you do the horizontal movement, you can assign firefighters to another building or 2 buildings away to operate those elevators. Your next challenge is, when it gets down to the street level, is it flat? Or you have to face stairs to take people out. If you're quickly moving people and getting them reestablished at another hospital, you can't have these little impediments in the way. So knowing your institutional things and where everything is a key here. We've had several major fires. One recently in New York City. It started in an atrium and it extended up into the hospital area of inpatients, and they had a choking point. The choking point was to get the patients down to one level, I forget what level, and go across a horizontal bridge into the next building. Knowing that ahead of time, all right, the incident commander can make this command decisions on what to do for a quicker evacuation and not jam things up. So knowing ahead of time, again, building information cards are very critical here. Mixed occupancies are popular these days. You see them all over the place, which is a good thing. We're mixing everything in here. The businesses, malls. In this particular building, they have a theater, a jazz theater for 5,000. In one building I dealt with, New York City, had a hockey rink on the top floor. So you need to know buildings and everything. Now, with these complexes, you have to have one central command station. You can have different fire alarm panels for the hotel, for the assembly hall, and for the mercantile spaces, but they all have to report back to a command center. And if they don't, you have to figure out ahead of time where the control points for these individual clusters that are in a big complex. They are very challenging in a sense. They're nice, but I just went to one real quick. I went to one in Vegas. I asked them, I have a cogen thing. I said to them, how do you shut it down? Oh, the solenoid over there shuts it down. My challenge to them was, where's the manual shut off? They all looked at me. Why do you want to know that? Because if that thing fails, that's my backup. And when we went into Gas Alley, that's what they named it. As I walked by, I said to the guy, where's the wrench for that? He goes, back there. It was the wrong size. So little things, just don't ask the question, follow it through. All right. Challenge them so you can be challenged. They can be challenged to give you the right answer. So finding a lot of things out with these buildings, you got to get in there and take them apart. Jerry has a great topic called urban hubs.
Before we move on to urban hubs, and I thank you for sharing all of that, these business enterprises, as we're referring to them, the lower floors having all of these different mercantile, public assemblies, theaters, hockey rinks, things like that. Things that you can expect in the floor plan, and the same thing that you can expect in hotels is something that's referred to as the back house. And what we mean by that, and you've probably been to large hotels, whereas there's large banquet rooms and things like that, and all the food and even the furniture that comes into that room is coming from back hallways, what we refer to as the back house. Now, that's important for the fire service to understand, especially, let's say a hotel is occupied. It's occupied with a banquet hall with thousands of people. And let's say an emergency breaks out, maybe stage, maybe an electrical fire under the stage, something like that, where all of those people are going to be evacuating from that space. And certainly the fire department doesn't want to come in like salmon swimming upriver. We will access that space from the back house. And there's stairwells with standpipes there. Well, you're going to find the same thing in these business enterprises. All of these mercantile establishments, if you will, all their goods are not delivered through the front door, through the mall itself, where the people are congregating and entering the space. There's a back house. So the same, let's say, methods of approach for fire would be from, let's say, the back hallways and back house of these areas as well. Jack mentioned urban hubs. Now, this is a phenomenon that we're seeing around the world. It's clusters of high-rise. That clusters are built in a development, if you will, that has maybe a public courtyard in the center, and that would be the main entrance to these buildings. But along the street, and we're saying urban hubs, the lower floors of these buildings also have mixed occupancies that provide all the needs for the people for their life existence in this urban environment, meaning food stores, restaurants, daycare centers, healthcare centers, of course, schools, things like that. There may be mass transit either at street level or below that can take people onto their workplace. But to say the main entrance is in the center of the cluster, there may very well, and there should be, entrances to stairwells leading up into these towers. And they may not, the standpipe barrages in these towers may not be interconnected with the other towers. So when supplying fire department connections, you have to supply the exact tower where the fire is located, and these buildings will not be interconnected above. So urban hubs are certainly a challenge. And now part 3 brings us on to the evolution of building a skyscraper. Now this is a very detailed chapter. And to say most cities today, they do not have the space to build a new high-rise that's going to require the demolition or deconstruction of the building. So we go into that in depth. We talk about excavating for foundations, where in New York City, that requires blasting. So we go into all the disciplines of that event of blasting, the safeguards. We talk about the operations and resources required at construction sites, following the NFPA standard 241, where there'd be fire safety and all hazard plans, emergency action plans, and a site safety supervisor, for which we're certainly suggesting develop a rapport with the site safety manager and a building intelligence representative that Jack had mentioned earlier, because inevitably we'll be responding to these buildings for mostly emergencies, but fires and sometimes collapse and crane collapse. And we certainly go into the details of that, cranes and the different types of cranes. We speak of a lesson learned from Deputy Chief Hodgins, who had commanded 2 different crane events, one at 51st Street on the east side of Manhattan and one up at 92nd Street. And we also go into existing building alterations, renovations, and abatement projects. There's not very much written on asbestos abatement and those events as well. So looking ahead, new designs
Excuse me one
and
sec.
techniques.
Excuse me
Yes.
one sec, Jerry. I just wanted to interject. Now would be the time for attendees to send in comments and questions in our chat box. So as we come toward the end of the program, we want to leave some time for that. And so now would be the time for you folks who are listening intently to what Jack and Jerry are saying here. Send your comments through the chat box. Thank you, Jerry.
Outstanding, and thank you for that. Jack, let's talk about new design and techniques.
New design and techniques. Many large global metropolitan areas are experiencing what I call cloud breakthroughs with super and mega tall buildings. And a super building, we're trying to get definitions on these. It's 984 feet or above, and a mega is 1984 and above. So we're trying to get those definitions out there so that in the future, the incident commander knows when they go into that box, that what type of building they have. High rise is one thing. Now you're dealing with super and mega. And that sets the stages for these multi-staging areas and rehab floors. The other thing too is that we're advancing technology with elevator systems. All right, we're coming out with elevators, 2 elevator cars in the same shaftway, totally running independently, not the stack-up elevators where if you go into a building, go into the lobby, you go to the even floors. You go up the mezzanine escalator, you get to the next car on top of the first car, and you go into the odd floors. Well, the idea here is that these are challenges in there. What controls them? What happens when people are trapped in them? And when they get recalled, do we get in the top car? Does the top car go up? So we have to figure out how they all come down. And do I need an extra deeper pit at the bottom so I can access the uppermost car? So those are some things that they're working on too. Another thing is the MRLs are out there, machineless room elevators, where you don't have the cable system and the wheel at the top. They can be tied in anywhere on the building, on the floor. I did some high rises in Jersey. I went to the 15th floor looking for the elevator machine room. The guy says, you shut it off in the 7th floor in the electrical room. So these are things ahead. Doing recon, you'll have an understanding and an intelligence that you gather from that. They're also working on other elevators. And Jerry goes to the next slide here. You'll get to see how that operates. Take this building now, and we're going to push it off into what I call Lego blocks. And now you have the elevators going horizontal and vertical at the time. So the idea here is that when I saw that is what happens when the elevator gets caught in the horizontal position. How do I get up there to get that car? So you have to figure out that out. Can which elevator vertical now comes down, at least access that horizontal position. Now you need more portals to enter too. Rather than having every so many feet in the elevator hoistway shaft, Jerry, now you're going to need horizontals too. All right.
Exactly.
And this is my favorite here. These are sky pods. All right. Just think of if you see the lines are running outside the building. All right. They go up, they go down. When I saw this, I said to Jerry, the first thing I thought of was the St. Louis Arch. It comes up on one side, goes to the top, and it comes down on the other side. It's not totally a sky pod, but it's the concept of dealing with that. So these are newer things coming in transportation and in the horizontal and vertical challenges of buildings. Let's get back to a little bit to cantilevers. The issues I see with cantilevers is that when they expand in dense areas, they buy the air rights above an existing building. And on an existing building, it's like a low-rise building, it's 3 stories. What about the roof membrane? Are we changing that out for a higher rating? Are there windows that open on the cantilever side above those low-rise buildings? Now you have issues with the roof fires going into the cantilever above. So just some things to throw out there that we should consider going down the road. Jerry, you want to talk a little bit about smart cities and smart firefighting?
Oh, absolutely. And here we're certainly professing, and of course NFPA has been on top of this. And I'd have to give a shout out to Casey Grant with the Research Foundation and NFPA talking about smart firefighting. But here, taking data in print, building intelligence that's in print and digitizing it so that it's available electronically while responding over a 5G and coming up to a 6G network, so that units on scene can access information, whether it be on small iPads or iPhones, and the incident commander, of course, can use smart pads. And Jack had mentioned earlier, building management systems and showing up to a building and having a Q code, and that Q code could access certain information in the building and give us the status of building systems and things like that. This is where the fire service needs to advance to. This is what we're professing and what we're really looking for, technology. And technology is out there, but we're looking for a vendor that can come up with the technology that's going to allow the fire service to access all of that information and make us better and smart firefighters, if you will. And there, it's looking ahead, new designs, techniques, and you look in the lower right-hand corner. That's a cantilevered structure that Jack really just mentioned. And yes, having buildings below that may have combustible roofs, that's an issue. Most certainly that should be a fire-rated building. But you'll also notice that top graphic, that structure there, that's the Sarkisto style tower. It's a proposal by an architect, Harry Attack. Now you take a look at that building to say new designs and techniques. A building like that may have a ventilation profile totally different from the typical high-rise building we have today, where smoke will travel in different ways. So there's many things that we still have yet to learn. And you'll also notice on the bottom there, modular type buildings that turn, and these cantilevers. And, you know, it was mentioned earlier, the tools and techniques we have for alternate tactics, smoke curtains, blankets, the high-rise nozzle. You know, a building with shapes like that may negate the use of that. So again, we're going to have to come up with methods and techniques to battle fires in buildings such as that with these crazy designs. And this is Jack's playground right there.
Yeah, super and mega, you know, going along 57th, 59th Street in Upper Manhattan there. In one of the buildings we went into, the real narrow one on the left there, it's 1,200 feet. The footprint at the top is 85 square feet. The base of the building obviously is larger, and it's a mixed occupancies. They have mercantile, they have restaurants, and assembly rooms too. But when you get up here, you have to look at the floors. I could see this from a distance, and you see at night the clear vision of light going right through at certain levels. Those are what they call blow-throughs. They're no windows. It looks like a window frame, but the wind blows through that to keep this thing from swaying somewhat. And when we were walking the building, the engineer kept saying, "We're going to go to the drum floor." I turned to the chief in the 8th and I said, "What's a drum floor?" He goes, "I don't know." So what up there? What it is? It's a circular mechanical room, all right, to deflect the wind as it comes through. And just thinking out of the box there, I just said, you know, I know you have to go through a mechanical space, but you may want to think this as a refuge area. If you can't get people down, at least they're open to the outside. So little things like that you look at. There's scissor stairs in these buildings. They came back. The top 5 floors is 1 apartment each. The other floors down to 21, 2 apartments. The elevator, the compactor for the trash goes from the top floor to the 21st floor, terminates there. So that's where the compactor is. And I said, well, I have an issue with that. I said, you know, we have compactor fires, yes, incompatibles. I said, now I take the product out, I bring it in the elevator, then the fire starts. It's like the mattresses that we had years ago, take it down the stairwell. Well, we don't do that anymore. So little things like that. Then you look at the building, you say, well, it's a sealed up building, but each apartment around the perimeter windows has storage areas, like storage bins. You open it up, or you can sit down on it, put pillows on it. You open it up, there are louvers there to the exterior. I said to the engineer, what are they for? He said, it's a green building. They let air in. I turned to the chief. This isn't a sealed building. You're going to have wind-driven fires now. The glass didn't break. So little things like that. They're having issues right now with this building, with the wind. Some feel like they're on a ship. There is a big weight. I think it's £1 million, something like that at the top to keep it from swaying. That had to be brought up, obviously, in sections. The elevators are breaking down too, and they have water leaks also. So we put these buildings up, we inherit it now. There are 3 different FDC zones for the building for pumping. There are multiple water pressure tanks in the building too. Obviously, we're good for in New York City with gravity tanks at the top, but you can't do that for this building. So they have pressurized tanks. They have stairwell pressurization in the residential building, and they have a one-way voice system in the residential building. All right, which is very good. All right, you can now direct people, to stay in their apartments and everything. So there are what I call positive things here. And then there are other things you have to step back and do another analysis. One challenge, and I'll leave you with this, we come out of one of the drum floors, and I'm walking up the scissor stairs, and I said to the chief, you go to the next floor that you have occupancy. Well, he went up and I walked back down again. Now we're used to getting into a stairwell and having one interstitial platform between floors. This had 4. With no well that I could bring the hose up in the middle. So now do I need more apartment pack? You know what I'm saying? Things of that nature that you talk about and take a look at. This is just one building. I have to get into the others. I'll bring that back in the next version. All right. So what I like to say here right now is, Jerry, the next slide, we'll move on.
Well, that's a thank you.
That's a thank you. Thank you for letting us share with you some of these vast, what we call vast vertical challenges associated with tall, super, and mega buildings. On behalf of all of us, be safe out there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to both of you. You covered a lot of ground in the last hour, and there's a lot of things for all of us to think about. So again, thanks for what you presented today. For everybody's information, also just to be aware, the book will be out for its premiere at the Fire Department Instructors Conference in Indianapolis next April. So keep that on your radar screen. If you're at FDIC, the 2 of them will be signing books there. If you're unable to attend, you'll be able to order it. And understand from Jerry that he'll drive to your house and sign it for you if you'd like to do that. So, anyway, we got some questions in the chat box here. So let's throw a few of them out for you. So the first one, let me get my screen here. The first one, if I can move this up.
I noticed they were asking a question about wooden high-rise, and I
neglected. Yeah, that's. Well, you want me to talk about that in a minute?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I neglected to mention, the materials and methods in Chapter 3 on construction. Of course, we talk about engineered lumber and CLT, and pardon me for neglecting to mention it. And yes, it's an issue. It would be ironic that this very week, the City Council of New York has approved the construction of timber high-rise here in New York City, only up to 85 feet high. But you know what? Once the camel gets his nose in the tent, it could be an issue. And of course, we speak about the fire protection measures, delamination. We certainly speak of that. If there's any voids, are they sprinkler protected? And all of those things. And yes, the book talks about engineered lumber. And thank you for that question.
Yeah, and so that's on the horizon here, and it's actually the horizon has arrived for us. It's ironic that you mentioned the equitable building fire at the beginning of your presentation. That was considered to be, quote unquote, a fireproof building. That was a term that was thrown around a lot around the turn of the last century. And that particular one, the equitable, actually had a decent amount of wood in the building structurally, part of the upper floors and the roof system. So wood is making a return, even though New York City effectively have banned it 150 years ago in large quantities. We are now going to be seeing high-rise wood buildings. And so the big question for all of us on this call is, what happens when that building is no longer desirable? What happens when that building is 40, 50 years old and it's falling apart? Nobody's paying the water bill. The sprinklers are turned off. It's full of squatters and drug addicts and people starting fires. What does that mean for an urban environment like Manhattan, right? What does that mean to have a high rise literally 15, 20 feet away made of wood from other exposed buildings? We know we've had some experience with that with traditional heavy timber, and they're always a challenge in New York City. So it's certainly something that I don't think most firefighters would encourage this, but it is being presented to us, and we're going to have to deal with it. So at least here in the future. So the first question we have in the chat room I saw was talking about inverted high rises, right? So from DFB is asking, what do we think about high rises below grade? So I'll toss this one to you guys. Think about, for example, Grand Central Terminal, 17 stories below grade. It's a high rise, but underneath the ground. So let's talk about that.
We have a whole subchapter on depth scrapers, going deep into the ground. As a matter of fact, there was a proposal in Mexico City on depth scrapers. And quite frankly, how do you control smoke there? And evacuation. They may have to, and somebody has to mute their mic. Evacuation. You're going up and smoke travels up. So in other words, firefighter smoke control systems are very, very important there. And most certainly access for firefighters and people. Yes, we speak about not only depth scrapers, we speak about ground scrapers, which take up vast sections of land. There's one in Germany built above a rail station that is thousands. It's longer than the Empire State Building is tall, and how to approach them and getting fixing in on the subject that Jack brought up and the challenge of, is there one fire control panel? Are there annunciator panels elsewhere? And what would be the response pattern to come into a building like that? So yes, we definitely speak about depth scrapers, and you're absolutely right. 17 stories down in Grand Central Terminal. And years ago, as a lieutenant in Fort Truck, Midtown Manhattan, we had basically homeless people living in trains at the lower level. And of course, they were down there cooking, and we had fires, and it was very, very difficult. And even when you run out of air, you're coming up stairwells that are still contaminated with smoke. Was very difficult. So the system that Jack had mentioned, firefighter air replenishment systems, become very, very important. And structures just like that, in depth scrapers and wide rise and things like that. Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. One of our questioners, PJM McBride, asks, what are your thoughts about developing a program, a series of classes on this and developing curriculum for it? Is that something you have on your horizon? Is that something you'd be looking to do? I'm sure you'll be presenting a similar presentation at FDIC, but are you thinking about maybe a class on high rises that would use the textbook as a base?
When we put the book together, and I think it was Murtaugh's idea, or Jerry's, I forget, we put numbering system in. So chapter 8, and then chapter 8, it goes down to chapter 8.1, 8.2, 8.2.1. So, and it's also can be used in college curriculum, and it also we geared it towards promotional tests for large metropolitan areas that have high rises. So it's a triple purpose, and I should say quad. The other thing is building management people should have a better understanding on the operations of these buildings from a fire perspective and life safety side of the house.
And that's why it's broken up into part 1, 2, and 3, and into subchapters. And it's ideal for different, let's say, classroom instructions and subject matter, if you will, because the book is so extensive. As a matter of fact, this year's FDIC 2022, Jack and I will be just presenting chapter 11, the evolution of constructing a high rise. And even there, 4 hours isn't enough, but we'll certainly give you a taste of the challenge, the things that you'll require in the way of resources, the rapport that you'll be establishing with the site safety supervisors, if they're not general contractors, things like that. So yes, we hope that this book will advance into a curriculum in many different facets and parts. That's our future.
Well, thank you. Oscar asks, what are your thoughts about creating a city-based separate department? So separate, I would imagine he's suggesting perhaps a separate department from the fire and buildings department whose sole responsibility is focused on high-rise building management and safety. So what would that look like? So if we broke off the high-rise function to a separate department, let's think about it in terms of, particularly in terms of approvals, inspections, stuff like that. Would that be desirable, and what would it look like, maybe?
To tell you the truth, we have a gentleman attending, and he is a chief in our fire prevention, meaning FDNY's fire prevention, Ron Canterman. So he could best answer that question, because I believe he's well versed in it, and he may very well be establishing that. Is Ron still on board? Maybe not.
I think I'm not sure. Let me look my screen here. I think
I don't think he's on right now.
Yeah.
Okay. But that, I mean, I think the point is that what Oscar's trying to drive at here is there's so many complicated issues going on. It seems that it really screams out for really specialized individuals who would address these things,
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, within the FDNY, we do have a high-rise unit inspection.
Yes.
And they're trained specially for high-rise buildings. So
Yes.
And they deal with tech management, who now is in charge of the fire alarm system, standpipes, any fire protection system going in. So those two in the units work together seamlessly, basically. And they'll work with the building department too. But at least we have a specialized group within this large department.
Right.
There's one question that wasn't mentioned, if I may just interject. There's a caller here, Hopkins, Taryn Hopkins asked the question, what height do you consider above the level of fire department pump capabilities? And that's an excellent question. And quite frankly, the design of buildings today really are in different zones with express risers, filling tanks and things like that. And we have high pressure pumpers in New York City, 3-stage pumpers that certainly have the capability of pumping over 250 PSI. And Jack is well versed on having labels at fire department connections for the pressures required for that zone. Not so much the fire floor, but that zone.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, our department and our chiefs are becoming so well aware of, let's say, the pressures required. It would be a chief in the 8th Battalion. Jack, what's his name?
Tom Lapola.
Tom Lapola had a fire in a high-rise building that a helicopter crashed in inclement weather onto the roof. And if you were to listen to the radio reports of the chief, who was the incident commander, speaking to the pumper that was supplying the system, he advised him the height of the building, not so much the floor, but the height, so they understood the exact pressures to pump into that building.
Right.
So yes, that's an issue. There are departments that only have 2-stage pumpers. They're looking into 3-stage pumpers so that they can meet the pressure requirements for high-rise buildings. So thank you for that question.
Yeah. And in high-rise construction and the new buildings, they were putting in the height of the floor next to the standpipe. We have now adopting that it's going to be retrofitted for existing high rises. That's going forth in the next code change.
Because there are buildings that the floor numbering systems is different in that there's vanity floors, meaning, let's say a whole number of floors, for instance, 10 through 20, there will be no 10 through 20. It goes physically floor 10, and then they'll call it floor 30. And these are referred to as vanity floors because it seems to be more prestigious that my apartment happens to be on the 60th floor when the building may not be that tall.
Interesting. Interesting. So we just have a quick comment from one of our board members, RaCERS board members, Larry Collins, all the way zooming in from all the way from California, the Golden State. and he wants to thank you for all your hard work on this, and he's really enjoyed the program. Larry, of course, many of us know him as to be one of the top real rescue people in the country now, but now he's now in the role of emergency management for the state of California. So
Good for him.
anyway, there's Larry real quick. Larry, I think your mic's off. Go ahead. Oh, your mic's on. I'm sorry, your mic's on, Larry. Go ahead.
Hey guys, thanks for the info. And of course, you mentioned helicopter just now. And as you know, on the West Coast and other places, there's been some work in using helicopters for helo high-rise or aerial company operations to help with either rescue or size up and possibly depositing firefighters to the rooftop to help gain access to the roof where it's feasible, where the wind and weather allows, and where there's even room to do that with antennas and so forth. So just a thought, because I'm watching how this all comes together, and that's great information, and people are thinking outside the box and the hows and whats and the whys. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you,
You are
Larry.
a great addition to the fire service, Larry.
Yes,
Thank
he
you for
has
everything
been.
you do.
He's the guy who brought tsunami to the fire service before we even knew what a tsunami was. He brought it to us. So,
Before I
Thank you,
got lectured by Ray Downey that nobody wants to hear about tsunami.
yeah, then a year later, we start seeing them all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a comment from or a question from Margaret Donovan, and this is an interesting question. So, if you look again historically, high rises, in 1900 was an 8-story building, right? So that was, we're talking about wooden ladders and, as I said, wooden men kind of situation. And so high rises have evolved over time, of course, and steel and concrete made that happen, going taller and taller and taller. We're at the point now where, for reference point, we know, for example, that it takes an enormous amount of time to evacuate high-rise buildings, very tall high-rise buildings. We know on 9/11 that, had the attacks occurred a couple hours later, that people would have died in the stairwells because they just literally couldn't get out of the building. They have nothing to do with the actual attack itself, but because they could not get out. And so as we get taller and taller, there's this whole issue of, do we move people out? Do we move people down? Do we move them different parts of the building? And what does that mean structurally? Because one important point that we need to understand here is that the building codes of today do not match up firefighting with building endurance. They don't connect those two things. So if Jerry says, yeah, we're going to have a 300-story high rise, how long does it take Jerry Tracy to get up to the 280th floor to deal with things? So Margaret, and that's a setup for Margaret's question here, does all firefighting above 25 stories is totally sky-based? Are megatalls intrinsically less safe than supertalls? Now, I'll throw my own 2 cents and say yes, but I'll leave it up to you guys. Go ahead.
I'll tell you what, I'm glad you brought that up. And I would hope in this audience of people attending, there's representatives from the Society of Fire Protection Engineers. You know what? The relationship between the fire service and the Society of Fire Protection Engineers needs to be stronger. We need to have a better relationship because we have some, not only questions, just that, the deficiencies in endurance. I mean, certainly Vinnie Dunn says these are supposed to be fire resistant structures. No, they're only supposed to last for a certain period of time. And if you really look at building codes, it's supposed, that period of time is only supposed to be for the evacuation of the occupants in the building, not for the time it may take firefighters to finish their operations of fire suppression and control and mitigation and things like that. So yes, that deficiency still exists. We speak about it in the book. And really, in essence, much of the book talks about smoke control because more people die of smoke inhalation than they do of exposure to fire. But we also discuss the efficiency of fire suppression, the types of fires you'll meet, and how to best approach them. So all of that is really discussed in the book. And before I go any further, I have to say and mention, if it wasn't for Sally Regenhard and all the things that she's done for fire safety for the public, She needs to really be acknowledged, and we have to thank her for that. So God bless you, Sally. Thank you.
Yeah, she's on the call, and I know she appreciates that very much, Jerry. We've got another comment from Jordan Hood, thanking you for what you're doing, and he's excited to get his hands on the book. So thank you. Another question, comment from PGM McBride. Does the book discuss human behavior and the challenges with those behaviors? So is there a little bit Norman Groner in this book, Jack, or some human behavior stuff, Jake Paul's, things like that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we talk a little bit about it. We're not as expertise as they are, but we talk about cameras. One thing, cameras in stairwells. All right, to see the evacuation flows, particularly now with these all hazard threats where you have to evacuate the building on certain conditions. Norman's in there too. It's just, and it's not in depth on it. I know we've hit it in several spots. I leave it up to them for their take on it, but on version 2, we'll invite them in.
Well, let me add this. We've certainly referenced, if you will, work done by Jake Walls, Guyleen Poirot,
right.
National Research Council of Canada. But, what's not mentioned, residential high-rise. It could very well be that more than 25% of the occupants in residential buildings could have some sort of a disability. Now, we're not talking about those disabled to a wheelchair or even worse, but walking difficulties, breathing difficulties, things like that, that the fire service has to understand. We have to have the resources on scene, dispatching officers, 911 call centers and things like that have to pass information on to the incident commander, and every call for assistance has to be addressed. They can't be blown off. The dispatchers can't say, oh, the fire department's there, they're taking care of business. No, we have to know and be given that information so that it can be addressed. We certainly have a domain, evacuation search and rescue groups that would be, let's say, given those assignments and things like that. So yes, we do understand, we do talk about human behavior, what you can expect as an incident commander and how to address that. So thank you for that question.
Yes. And one of the things we did look at, particularly what I call pre-event, and when we know there's a storm coming, like a tornado, not a tornado, that's real quick, hurricane, flooding, things like that, we put in the book there what we call pre-event evacuations, particularly for people with disability on life support systems. And in there, we categorize them almost like level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is life support system, the individuals on oxygen, things of that nature. And what we looked at is do the pre-evacuation out of the zone, move them to a safe area. Because once one of these storms, particularly Sandy, hit in certain areas of the city, we couldn't get back there because of the flooding. The other thing we learned too is that if you're in these major flood zones, take the elevator car, throw it up on the 3rd floor, lock it out. I may lose the main controls in the basement, but at least I'm trying to diminish that. And let me just go back again about evacuations. These buildings are never designed to be fully evacuated. Think about it. We're dealing with 44-inch stairwells. All right, take a 30-story building. All right, and now you're dealing with here it is. Here's the Jake Paul thing, stopgap method. A stopgap method happens every time you open the door on the floor. People coming in, everybody standing in the stairwell stops and everything. So the whole idea, if they did that, it would be an arena evacuation. Think of Madison Square Garden. Corridors are 20 feet wide. You go into the stairwell, they're 12, 14 feet wide with banisters in the middle. And they get down to the bottom there, 8 to 10 doors. Now let's go back to the high rise. 44 inches, 30 stories, and left with 1 door at the bottom. So these are all the things that we went through on the fly after 9/11 to evacuate, and how to stagnate that, how to use elevators. Elevators come in for evacuation for all hazards under that domain of all hazard threats. But if it's an inside threat with a chemical, you can't use the elevator. So the things switch quickly in the EAPs. Rather in the fire, you're dealing with certain things, but EAP could be inside, outside. What is it? What is it? it's kind of, that's why we want a dedicated person. All right. So
Right.
I hope I answered some of those points there.
No, very important, very important. Jerry, Sally sends her regards. She thank you very much for your comments. So I wanted to put that out there. We have a question or a comment from, actually, it's a question from Dan Talbot. So we were talking about New York City for the most part, big cities. So his question is, for Jim Murtaugh, what would he, because Jim is not on this particular session right now, I don't believe, but if Jim Murtaugh were asked, along with you guys, what would you do for smaller communities that can't assemble 100 firefighters in 20 minutes? What do we think about there? What's the priorities? What are the things that you should be doing there? Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, so many departments, their policies and procedures for the first arriving units is that first arriving unit sets up command and stays in the lobby. That is a built-in delay for any sort of suppression and intervention for any type of response, whether it be a fire or an emergency. So most certainly what we're suggesting is the information, of course, this first unit to arrive is gathering information on arrival. They do their visual size up outside, coming in. If it's a building that has a fire safety director of some sort of a responsible person, you're gathering information from them as to why am I here. And you go through the disciplines of phase 1, phase 2, the use of fireman service with elevators. In other words, we're talking and suggesting that the first unit to arrive should get into a position, a physical position of the floor, and determine how much fire, where's the fire, can it be contained? If it's an apartment and there's no occupancy in the apartment, meaning they've vacated the apartment, possibly it can be contained. Now, we're not talking about a building that has combustible cladding or anything like that, but at least contain it so that now maybe we could, service the people that are calling. But with those units, it could be an engine company with only 2 firefighters. So that's going to be an officer and a firefighter up on the 5th floor with a pump operator downstairs. You'll have to address all of those disciplines required to safely approach what it is you're responding to, communicate. In other words, those departments that require that first unit to set up command and stay in the lobby, those departments are more concerned with the incident command system than they are in suppression and intervention of a fire or an emergency. And that shouldn't be it. So those departments that have limited resources, well, certainly you should have mutual aid agreements, regional aid agreements that other departments are coming in once it's determined that you have an actual fire. And then you have to think about the response times as well. It's going to take time. So do what you can to contain a fire if it's possible. If not, then back off the floor. I mean, if there's a life hazard present, that has to be addressed immediately and do the best you can. Otherwise, contain the fire and make it safe for the people to evacuate. And it goes on to say, some high-rise buildings can take up to 4 hours to evacuate. So those cities with limited departments, I'm sure they don't have buildings that size that they're going to face that challenge.
Yeah. The other thing in the book there, we do mention small towns, big buildings. And just what Jerry said, mutual aid, you have to create an automatic alarm assignment for them. You don't have to wait the call. You get a reportable working high-rise structure fire and it's confirmed. That should be automatic alarms going out to the neighboring towns that you have a mutual aid agreement. Also, you need to train together as groups from different communities too. All right. And the other thing too is that if you have mutual aid groups and you are at a major fire somewhere in your town that don't require, I should say, is not a high rise, and now you have a high rise fire or another fire, do they have access to the knock boxes in your community for keys? So little things that keep popping up, So when you get into the mutual aid concern, by me, I'm across the river from Manhattan. I couldn't get 100 firefighters on the first box. I called a mutual aid 4th alarm assignment. That means 10 towns in the mutual aid were coming in at the same time. The next mutual aid group task force is now being redeployed into my area that I need them. So that was done automatically over time. I think we did that almost 20 years ago.
All right. So it's all about doing this ahead of time, trying to
Yeah,
think these things
right.
through
Yeah.
and not wait till the actual fire breaking out in a high rise and
Right.
not having enough people there. So speaking about not having enough people, we actually running also out of time now. So it's 3:28. I'd invite Charles to come back on to sort of close our session for today. Charles, I believe we're going to be, as we've done in the past here, actually have it's recorded and we'll be posting it at some point to YouTube on the RaCERS webpage. Am I correct? Or
That is correct, Glenn. It should be probably 1 to 2 weeks. We'll have it up on the website. If you registered for the event, you will get a notice when that is posted. So if you had to leave early or if you couldn't make it, you would still get notified that the video is available. So just want to thank Jerry and Jack and Jim for their work on this. It's been a major project for them. I think it's going to be a great resource for the fire service, and long overdue. But I think it's going to be a really authoritative, an important book. And we're so happy to have our association with it, and happy that we had a great attendance here today. And I want to thank all those people from the fire service, the engineering community from all over the place who dialed in for the event.
one last thing, if you don't mind, Charles, Sally would like to unmute. Can you unmute her? She just wanted to say thank you. So she's unmuted. I see her. She's unmuted.
Okay, I just really wanted to take the opportunity to thank so much Jerry Tracy and Jack Murphy, Jim Murtaugh, even though he's not here, and certainly Glenn Corbett and Charles Jennings from John Jay College, who envisioned and made the Christian Regenhard Center for Emergency Response Studies possible and has supported all the efforts. I want to thank all of them who have been on all these committees. They're better men than I am for listening to people who aren't as interested in building safety. So thank you very much. Sal Casano, the former fire commissioner, a visionary person who adopted and supported many of these efforts, and Larry Collins from California, also a great supporter. And last but not least, Margaret Donovan, who asked one of the questions. She was a very early supporter of all of our efforts right after 9/11, a valued member of the public, because if we don't inform the public, they won't realize how really unsafe buildings can be. So thank you all so much. And everyone who participated, I hope you'll come back, because it's a fabulous group of people. And thank you very much again.
Hey, thank you, Sally. Just to interject here, what I forgot to mention, the theme is of this fall's talks are all 9/11 20 years later. So the timing obviously on this book is speaks for itself. And that is our program in November is going to be talking about looking back at the emergency response and how things have changed over the last 20 years. And several of our board members are going to be on there. And then in December, we're going to have a great opportunity to really reflect on some of the legislative action that grew out of, in large measure, Sally's advocacy post 9/11 and how that has continued through to this date. So thank you all, and hopefully you can join us for that. I'll turn it back over to you, Glenn, to wrap things up.
April of 2022, we hope to see the book published.
Oh, yeah, that was one of the questions. The last question got April 2022. So we hope it'll be available at that point, and it's through Fire Engineering books and videos. So again, thank you for everyone coming today. I encourage you to get on the RaCERS website and sign up. We'll send you emails about all the upcoming events. We've done dozens of these over the last several years, of from soup to nuts. I think, like I said, I think you will find them all very interesting. And like I said, all of you, hope your future is bright, and hope to see you all again at another event. So thank you very much, and take care, everybody.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Charles.
Yes, thank you.